We're listening to former President Trump after day one of the post-jury selection portion of his criminal trial for alleged hush money payments. The prosecution called their first witness after opening statements today, and now we're hearing from former President Trump about that case and another one playing out just down the street. I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, for a little bit more on a few things the president said here, John, because we heard former President Trump saying that nobody wanted to bring this case against him, talking about how this case dates back many, many years, that it all centers on this small bookkeeping thing. And then he said something we've heard before. This is all coming out of the White House.
Yeah, and let me say again, and we should reassert every time we hear this, there is no evidence for that whatsoever. Joe Biden, the Biden White House, the Biden Justice Department have absolutely nothing to do with this case and nothing to do with the the civil fraud case against his company, the other one that he's talking about. These are New York cases. The Manhattan District Attorney, the New York Attorney General have nothing to do with Joe Biden or the Biden administration. But I think what's notable here is we have expected, and it's been signaled by the former president's political advisors, that he would use the opportunity that he has every day because he's stuck in this courtroom to come out and to have the platform. The cable news networks carry it. We carried part of it, and to use that basically as his campaign platform. I don't know that this works for him. I mean, he sounds like he is complaining, grievance about the sometimes esoteric details of these cases against him. And once again, he looks like a guy who is a criminal defendant, because actually he is a criminal defendant, who is complaining that the system is working against him, which is what criminal defendants often do. He doesn't look like a commanding presence, a guy that is the Republican candidate for president of the United States.
Jeremy, he also is facing a gag order, and they're supposed to be hearing about that tomorrow. Among other people, he is not supposed to disparage Michael Cohen, one of the key witnesses in this case. And we heard him today talking about how Michael Cohen was a bad attorney for him and sort of getting into that ground. Is he at risk here? And what happens if he is found to have violated this gag order? Because he has posted on social media many times now about Michael Cohen.
Donald Trump's always at risk. And it in fact, shocks me that despite there being an agenda in terms of politics and his campaign, that a criminal defense attorney or criminal defense attorneys, he's got a team, is sitting by and allowing him to rant like a Charlie Brown cartoon and just go on and on, running the risk of, just as you said, potentially violating that gag order. And if there is another violation, the people will make that application to the court. There would be a potential hearing because it's not in the presence of the judge. It can be pursued as something as a civil or criminal. Here it would be criminal, meaning that they would want to punish him up to $1,000 if true, and then potentially up to 30 days in jail, which likely would never happen. But more he does this, the more he also runs the risk of saying something that the prosecution could potentially even use in their case in chief, meaning their direct case against Donald Trump. So it really bewilders me. I get the agenda here, the politics, but you have a criminal defendant with a potential felony that does not go away, whether he sees a day in jail or not. It is permanent, no expungement. And there he is, going and going and going. Someone really needs to get control of him if they have the courage, but evidently they don't.
And I want to go back to Aaron Katersky, who's outside that courthouse, because, Aaron, we heard Trump talking about, this is a bookkeeping issue, a little line, he said, where he paid an attorney to deal with an issue and listed it as a legal expense. He says, end of story. What do you make of that compared to what we heard in court today?
Well, certainly prosecutors have a different view. They believe that this payment, the reimbursement payment to Michael Cohen after he had wired hush money to Stormy Daniels, was done in such a way that was meant to undermine the election, so voters before the 2016 vote didn't find out about it. But to Jeremy and Jonathan Karl's point, one of the things that Trump has just done in the hallway is potentially undermine an argument that his defense attorney was making in opening statements. Defense attorney Todd Blanche said during his opening statement that President Trump had nothing to do with the invoice, with the check being generated, or an entry on the ledger. And in fact, there was Donald Trump now speaking about the minutia of how this payment reimbursement payment to Michael Cohen was logged each and every month, how it appeared on the invoices, how it appeared on the checks in the ledger. And that is what prosecutors say constituted the crime here and why they put Trump at the center of an alleged scheme.
John Santucci, how important is that to hear Aaron saying that what Trump just said outside the courtroom contradicts his own attorney's opening statement?
Extremely, because here we go again. And the reason I make that point is look at what Donald Trump did during the New York Attorney General's case. He would go outside of court, make comments to cameras, and there were multiple instances that in that case, the judge and attorneys for the New York Attorney General's case would say, he just said this, he made this comment. In particular, the judge in that case, if you recall, Donald Trump was also under a gag order, was attacking the clerk in that case. Donald Trump, during those proceedings, on one of the days he showed up, attacked the clerk. Donald Trump was called to the stand by the judge and said, what did you just say? What were you doing out there? So to think that prosecutors or the judge himself are not listening to Donald Trump's words right now, I think he's going to have to learn that the hard way.
All right, Aaron Katersky, John Karl, Catherine Falders, Jeremy Saland, thank you all. And we will be following this trial all day long. We'll bring you updates as we get them right here on ABC News Live. Keep it here.